Hello. So, now you're the SENDCo. There are very different routes into being a SENDCo, I've found. And some people who are perhaps on SLT and then get lumped with it. Some people who their sole reason for entering teaching is so that they can become a SENDCo. They're an aspiring SENDCo from day one. And I suppose all shades of people in between, in terms of how much they've always wanted to be a SENDCo and work in SEND or not.
But I think what you often find is that it is not a specialist in the role. Someone finds themselves in that role without perhaps the level of experience, knowledge and skills that you'd like to have when in that role. And that's quite unique, I think. The head of French generally is a very experienced French teacher before leading that department, and that's not always the same for a SENDCo. And it certainly wasn't for me, and it may not be for you. For me, the most important things are it needs to be someone with an inclusive approach, with a track record of working hard to include a range of needs within their classroom, someone who's empathic and someone who's willing to learn. And if you do those things, I think anyone can be a very successful SENDCo and keep a very strong emphasis on whole school teaching and learning, not on very nuanced and niche bits of SEN knowledge that you hold on to yourself. So you all know, there is a statutory requirement that you do then a SENDCo award which many universities offer. And some offer online routes, distance learning, that kind of thing. I did mine at the Institute of Education at University College London. I used to work as a head of year in a secondary school, and I found that I had to start avoiding the staff room. I was the person who people told off. And in the SENDCo role, I'm the person people come to when a child needs support, not when they need a telling off. And it's a really privileged role, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I have. When you're new to the role, I would expect yourself to start being too inward-looking. So thinking about the members of your department, the teaching assistants, and perhaps a range of roles within the inclusion or SEN department, learning support department. And thinking about those as your key stakeholders, rather than focusing on the whole school. And I think there's no need to be harsh on yourself about that because that takes time. The easiest thing to do is to work with the closest people around you before thinking about how I can make this a whole school role and have a whole school impact. So not something you need to do immediately, but something of course to keep in mind throughout. And when you are new, my advice is to enjoy being new. So take the time to do various things to help you fully understand your context before you do anything else. So the main thing being, see as many children as you can in class. There's nothing like being new for giving you a great excuse to be going into lots of classes or for learning walks or whatever you want to call them, to go in and see the children in class. And of course, you are then given the chance to see the teachers, the teaching and learning, and to see it from the adult point of view in the classroom. But really, you're just getting to know as many children with SEND as you can through the many groups in your school. The next thing is to meet with post holders. Try, if you can, to make a whole school impact. And I'll talk about this more in other videos. You want to meet as many different people who are seemingly unconnected directly to SEN, but clearly are one of your stakeholders. So if someone is in charge of Key Stage 1, be speaking to them about actually, do they know who's got SEN in their key stage? Do they have concerns about others who maybe aren't on the SENDCo's radar previously and should be? My next piece of advice is to find out what your head teacher wants from you. Nothing really gets too much traction unless the head teacher is willing to drive it or allow you to drive it. So find out what they want from you, what they think was missing under the previous SENDCo perhaps. Unless your context is one of disaster, my advice is to implement nothing of your own for months, for 3 months if you can. So, to be thinking, I don't need to make an impact here, I need to learn. And I need to hold on to what needs to be done and begin to engage lots of people and build lots of relationships, but actually not try and implement change for a period of months, unless obviously you're directed to. The next thing I recommend is to read a lot, particularly about the children on your SEN register and their needs. There are often in schools files that if only people read them, they'd have a huge impact on context and knowledge that they could then think about sharing. But those files sit in cabinets or on computers, and new in any role, just taking that time to close the door and read will give you great shortcuts to, oh, that child has a speech therapy report, and some recent advice and some recommendations that seem to have got lost, and I can make sure they're not lost anymore. So reading a lot, but also about what your predecessor did. Reading a previous SENDCo's development plans, action plans, that kind of thing. And then if you do need to increase your knowledge, you're basically reading summaries of how different types present, giving you some shortcuts to how you might be advising teachers and new teachers, trainee teachers, and that kind of thing. Of course, at the beginning of your role, you need to work out how and where you'll do the SENDCo course, as I've mentioned. And then I hope that the next step is to watch these videos and get some practical tips on how to be the most effective that you can be in the role.